Hello and welcome to Brutally Honest Talk Radio. This is Elmo the Conservative, and I have in the studio as a guest on the show today Ken Good. He is a bail attorney. He's going to talk to us about some of the things connected to and aspects of bail reform, and the judicial system. Or maybe some things that the way it works now. Maybe some things that need to change. So, all right, Ken, we finally got together and made this happen. So, how are you feeling today?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. It's been a busy couple of days. Seems like it's always that way right now. But I just had an article published in the Attorney at Law magazine a couple of days ago on crime, rising crime. So thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to come on
Yes,
your show and talk about these very important issues.
yes, sir. Yes, thank you for coming. It is important, and people are going to be blessed with the information and awareness that you're going to be able to share. So, um, one question that I had, I guess I'll start with, is just like, and I don't know if it varies from state to state. I'm in Georgia. I believe you're in Texas,
That's right.
right? And so, just for where you are, what is the general amount of bail that can bail someone out for different crimes like murder, rape, robbery, or different things?
Well, in Texas, bail is set by the trial court judge, and they have to take several things into consideration, and those are set out in 1715 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure of the different factors that they have to consider. And so, uh, bail is going to be different, not only depending on the county, depending on the court. So each court can, come up with their own ideas of what they think a murder bond should be, and they'll take into consideration what the personal situation is for a defendant. So someone who's poor would have one amount, someone who has financial resources would have another amount. And so I think that's what bail in Texas is intended to be. You're supposed to take into consideration the individual circumstances of the person who was arrested,
Okay.
and then apply these factors to, do they, and probably right now in Texas, the most important is what's your criminal history. If you're
Okay.
first time being arrested, you're going to be treated one way, but if you've been arrested multiple times, and some of them are serious crimes, and you spent some time in the prison system, then you're going to be treated a very different way. And that's the way the bail is intended to be done in Texas. I'm not sure that how bail is run in Georgia, but I have a feeling it's very similar. Where we
Hmm.
kind of get in trouble with these bad bail reform measures is where they want to make it a cookie cutter. If you're arrested for theft, then you're going to get released on X, whether it's $100 personal bond, whether it's released on your own recognizance, or they kind of have some kind of scheduled amount. And the problem with that is, you know, it doesn't take into consideration your criminal history. How many times you've been arrested? Are you in a gang? Are you organized crime? Are you a career criminal? And we our criminal justice system is intended to treat everybody individually. If
Hmm.
we want to give you just the least amount of pressure we need to give you to make you become a productive citizen. When we change over to cookie cutter, where we want to treat everybody the same, we
Hmm.
end up having organized crime, gangs, and career criminals figure out ways to take advantage of it because we
Right.
take away discretion from the trial court judge.
Now let me ask a question with some kind of a scenario rather specific. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say that there's a criminal. This is his third time being arrested for stick up. A store or a gas station, and what if he doesn't have a job where he can provide a paycheck stub, or where he can prove what his financial situation is. So just with it being the third time as opposed to the first time, if those are enough factors, just based on that, what's a typical
Well,
bail?
in Texas, one of the factors that the trial court determines is your ability to pay. But the courts have held that that's only one factor. It's not the trump. It doesn't trump all the other factors. And so it's just one consideration. So the fact that you've been arrested before multiple times for the same offense, if the court set bail higher and it even set it at an amount that you couldn't afford, then it's not because you're poor, it's because you have a criminal history. And the cases would say that that's all okay. The problem we have is we have advocates that think that's not okay. They don't think you should ever hold somebody in jail on an amount of bail they say they can't afford. Well, that causes that one factor to trump all the others. That actually ties the hands of the judges. It prevents them from using their discretion, and it actually causes chaos, and causes de facto decriminalization, and it's a green light for criminals to commit more crime.
That's another question I was going to ask you. When you said the court determines what the cost is, do you mean the judge specifically, they decide?
In Texas, the judge is responsible for setting bail. It can be, you can file a motion to reconsider it, you can file a motion to lower it at any time, and you can appeal the judge's decision on bail, but it's on appeal, it's an abuse of discretion standard. So it's difficult to be reversed. We see change, the bail reform movement has pushed to tie the hands of the judges in certain situations. Where they start with is they say, well, on these minor crimes, we want everybody just to be released. Like in New York, they want them to be released without bail. California, they were released for a while on zero bail. In Harris County in Houston, Texas, right now, they would be released on a personal bond for $100. All of those are examples of what I call simple release, where we're making charge-based decisions. So we're deciding on whether we're going to release them or not based on the charge they've been arrested for. Not how many times, not in light of their criminal history. It's just, this is what you're charged with. And I don't think that's good for the criminal justice system because it causes crime to increase.
Now, if like in your county, if there's someone that commits a serious crime, but something that they can be bonded for, how long is it before they would have to show up? They committed a crime, so they're going to have a trial, so that they're released until the date of the trial.
Well, okay, so when bail is set, let's say you have a violent offense and bail is set and you have family or you can afford it, so you post the bond amount, whether it's cash bond or whether you go to a private surety and you pay them a premium, and then they post the bond for you, you get out of jail. As long as you are in compliance with the court's orders, you go to court when you're supposed to go to court, then you're going to remain out of jail. That, if you violate the conditions of your bond, like if you have a dirty UA, or you're caught using drugs, then that would be a violation of the conditions of your bond. Or if you don't show up for court when you're required, that would be a failure to appear. Sure. All those things the court then can use against you to then hold you in jail. But by and large, if you do what you're supposed to do, you will be out of jail until the case goes to trial or gets resolved, either with a plea or a dismissal. I think that's correct. That's all I have to say on that.
And if the suspect is not someone who's famous or not a case that's been on the news or high profile, is there a typical length of time until that trial would come, or does that vary a lot?
Well,
from
I think
one
especially right now, since we've come out of COVID, there's a huge backlog on cases all over the place. And so it depends on where you are. But I would say for a violent offense, I would say at least 2 or 3 years with the backlogs we currently have in place. There's going to be pressure on the courts there is a lot of pressure on courts to get those backlogs down. And they're trying to do that. And some of the ways they're doing it is discounting the punishment, or they're dismissing cases just to clear out the backlogs. But so there's going to be a push to try to get that to a smaller number. But right now, I think 2 or 3 years is a good rule of thumb, because in a lot of places it's even longer than that.
Wow. Yeah. And that's not good.
It's not good for the victims. It's not good for the criminal justice system. It's not good for the defendants. I mean, it's not good for anybody, but it's the reality of where we are. I
Yeah.
mean, these simple release mechanisms, you could argue that the more you use them, the more courts you need, because,
Yeah.
every release mechanism comes with a different failure to appear rate. So the private industry has the lowest failure to appear rate. So more people go to court using the private industry. That's the reason why I say we do one thing, we do it really well. We get people to go to court.
Yeah.
Cash bonds have a twice the failure to appear rate of the private industry, but any of these simple release mechanisms have an astronomically high failure to appear rate. I mean, at least 50%. Harris County, according to HarrisCountyCourtWatch.com, the simple release and misdemeanor court in Harris County has an 80% failure to appear rate. I did a podcast with a DA from California. He said that's what they use across the board for misdemeanors in California, and they have an 80% failure to appear rate. In criminal cases, if you don't show up, your case is put on hold. And in California, they have a Speedy Trial Act. So if you don't go to court, the clock is ticking on the deadline to get the case resolved. And if you just don't ever go back, there's pressure on the court to dismiss the case. So that's the reason why I keep saying, chaos. The more failure to appears there are, the more chaos there is. The more chaos, there's de facto dismissals, which is de facto decriminalization, which criminals see that and say, hey, I can commit more crime. I'll get away with it.
And where's that location with the speedy trial clause?
That's the state of California.
In California. Yeah. And before you said that, I was thinking about just people having the right to a speedy trial, but that's kind of subjective now. And, I don't know if there's anything they can do about making that more specific. But at the same time, I know that people that are in the judicial process, they are backed up even before COVID, where
we also have this whole lack of trust of the criminal justice system that's been growing over the years. So even though our court system is overwhelmed right now, the rate that we're resolving alleged crimes is going down. So we're arresting fewer people because we are not solving crimes. I mean, we have like a third of murders that are going unresolved, even more. And the ones that we do charge, 50% of all murders in the United States are being committed against young black males. And by and large, the people doing it are young black males as well. So this bail reform movement that we're doing to supposedly make amends for past wrongs, we flip the narrative. We're favoring the young black male murderer over the young black male victim or the decedent. And we're releasing these people. And what are we finding? They're going back and committing more crimes in the very neighborhood where they live, which is usually the same racial group. So we're actually causing crime to go up. And when crime goes up, it goes up faster in our minority communities. So we're making the problem
committed in the
worse
same
for
community.
them.
Yeah. So that's staggering that there's such a large chunk of criminals that are not being arrested and brought to justice. And now we have the DNA certainty. But what do you think is the reason why so many criminals are not being caught and brought to justice? What's
I think part
the
of
biggest
it is
challenge?
crimes are not being reported. And, we've got in our urban areas, like in California, in our urban areas, they decided we're no longer going to prosecute theft under $950.
Right.
So we have record shoplifting taking place in stores. Well, okay, so if you're not going to prosecute it, then police stop arresting. And then when police stop arresting, we're not safer. Crime is actually going up, and no one is doing anything about it. And so we have to change that mentality. And then when mentality starts to settle in, well, then the public gets cynical. Well, why would I call the police? They're not going to do anything. And then you get people taking justice into their own hands. And then we've got examples in New York where they're prosecuting the people that stepped in to try to help somebody, because we don't want vigilante justice. But if the state's not going to provide safety for the public, the public will demand it. And that's why you see members of the public reaching out to provide safety to the people around them.
Yeah, that's a real problem. I heard about the thing in California, and I believe in Washington as well, where people can shoplift, and there's these hundreds of dollar limits depending on if you're in San Francisco or Portland or wherever. And here in Georgia, I've seen videos on YouTube of guys with shopping carts going through Walgreens or whatever, just with their chest out and feeling entitled. And the clerks, the people that work there, they're not security or the police. And when they speak to them or try to stop them, they're wrestling with them, and they're not running out of there. They're walking out. Like,
Well, and when this
you know what I
started,
mean?
we were told, well, these are only property crimes. No, there's no one that's getting hurt. Or we were told, oh, these people are only stealing the necessities because they need to
Right.
provide for their family. And what people don't realize is when we set up a system like that, where we tie law enforcement's hands, where we tie the judge's hands, who steps into that void? It's organized crime steps in, and organized crime has figured out ways to make millions of dollars out of this situation, where they'll just, post on social media for everybody to go to this place and shoplift for the day. And then they turn around and they go somewhere and turn it in to whoever did that, and they get pennies on the dollar. And then these people are selling it on Facebook Marketplace or Amazon Marketplace, and they're making millions of dollars. It's crazy. We did not think through the ramifications when we decided, we want to be more forgiving. I mean, we have to have public safety or we don't have a society. And so we're finding that out now. And so we have the Proposition 47, which originally started this whole thing about we're no longer going to prosecute crimes that are $950. There's a proposition on the ballot in November in California to repeal it or roll it back in major ways. We've seen New York, where they've rolled back their reforms 3 times now. Probably will do it again after the next election. And so in Harris County, major push to change what they're doing, but the politics has still got a strong hold there, and so they don't even acknowledge there's a problem.
Yeah. It's I don't know what the root of that is or where that comes from, where some people go so hard for the favor of the criminal. And we know that you can say that people are getting necessities and things that they want, but it's not like food stamps or SNAP, where there's certain limits on that. At least they can, the only stipulation is that they don't go over a certain amount when they're shoplifting this stuff, so they can get anything they want. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And if what they don't get today, they can come back and get tomorrow. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, that's a good point. That limit is only for one stealing for one session or on that day, but then tomorrow. And then, of course, people should know, the criminal probably knows, that when they do this, that the store is going to make the paying people make up the difference. So they raise the prices of stuff. As if
worse than that, because businesses can't withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting. Not in this economic climate. I mean, we've got one party right now accusing businesses of price fixing, where their profit margin is 3% for goods and services, for food that we eat, and so to then turn around and say it's their price gouging, it's ridiculous. We can't withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting. I can't even keep my doors open if I have that much shoplifting a day. And we're now accusing the business of price gouging. No, I mean, we've created an impossible situation for business owners, and we should not be surprised that they're either closing or they're moving out of state to another state or another community that wants to keep themselves safe and the business safe for their citizens.
Right. And then when that business closes, that whole store is no longer available to that community or that zip code. And then the employees, they're either going to be fired or forced to move to another store.
Yeah, and probably they're going to lose their jobs. But the worst thing is for grandma and grandpa who are retired, have a fixed income. They were relying upon that store just a few blocks from where they live to get their medications, and it's now closed. And so now if they're going to do that, they have to go 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away. They have to go public transportation, which just opens them up to more opportunities to be taken advantage of.
Right, right. Ken, let me ask you to stand by for just a minute. I need to make an adjustment on my side, and I'll be right back. Right back. Moment. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I don't know. This should make it easy for politicians who are running in cities and for governor in states to just point to that. I have to believe that the majority of people who are not the majority of people are not criminals and not shoplifters should be on board with someone saying we're not going to tolerate this. We're gonna fight to remove this or any limit. If somebody steals a candy bar or a pack of gum, wrong is wrong. I think that's just a Christian value that there's right and there's wrong, even though there's different degrees of it. So if somebody decides that they want to steal, they're going to have to appear before the law, and it'd be decided what their punishment is going to be. And I volunteer at a food pantry, and there are people that come there to get food, and then if they need furniture, clothing, or whatever it is, they can sign up for that. And that's not the only one. There are many other places that people can go, but they don't want to do that. They want to go shopping and have hand-picked choices. So there are places that people can go for different things. And just something else I was going to say or offer is just the fact that we've been told that because of when there's a recession or inflation or unemployment is high, that of course people are going to go out and commit crimes and steal. When in our grandparents' day, and my grandparents were young people during the Depression, I don't know of anyone committing crimes, and it's because of the the family being strong and their parents teaching them right from wrong. There's right and there's wrong, and if you go out and especially if you steal something or commit some kind of crime, there's punishment. So as far as that goes, and we're not even talking about rape or murder right now. We're talking about petty crimes. It starts in the home with the way that they're raised.
Well, and I think probably the problem that we're seeing right now is, we all want to be forgiving. I mean, when we feel safe, we're always more forgiving on our criminal laws. I mean, we're kind of going through the same cycle right now that we went through in the 60s. In the 60s, we felt more safe. We were more forgiving on our criminal laws.
Mhm.
We had a period where it just seemed like it was working. And then just like now, we have crime going up. And then we had a debate of how to address it. And we had one party that was refusing to participate or do anything to address the rising crime. And as a result, we had a
Yeah.
backlash. And ultimately, in the 80s, as a result, Ronald Reagan was elected and he had his platform with his war on crime. I would argue we're doing this. We're committing the same mistakes. We're going through the exact same cycle that we went through in the 60s, except now it's much more severe. The pendulum is swinging much harder to one side. because we have all these activist group arguing that, hey, this is what we think we should do. We're going to release a whole bunch of people from prison, and that's going to make us safer. Well, that doesn't even make common sense. And so over time, it proves to be that it was stupid, that it was not common sense.
Yes.
And then we have this period where crime is going up, and then we have these same groups saying, oh, crime is not going up. You know, look at this statistic. It's your crime is actually going down. It's your perception of crime. And I just wrote an article about that in the Attorney at Law magazine, addressing about rising crime and why is it an issue that we're arguing about? We shouldn't be arguing about it, because rising crime affects public safety. It affects businesses being able to stay open, and affects its commercial properties, and that affects the values of commercial properties, and that affects tax bases for inner cities, and all those things are being negatively impacted. But we're having this debate. I mean, it's weird, but I think if you can realize that there's a reason for it. If they were to acknowledge that crime is going up, but they're not doing anything about it, their supporters would give them a backlash like you never saw. And so they can't acknowledge, they can't admit crime is going up because they don't want to change what they're doing. And so we're now in this period where they're trying to distract the public, right? The last election and this election, they're trying to say, we shouldn't be talking about crime. We shouldn't be talking about immigration reform. We should just be talking about abortion rights. And so that's probably what prevented them, the last election, from having a bigger backlash. And we're going to hear about abortion for the next 4 weeks until the election, because they're going to try to do it again. We'll see. I think the immigration issue, which is so interrelated to the crime issue, is probably to the extent at this point going to trump everything, especially now with hurricane relief. We find that the federal government has been sending that to the states for them to spend on illegal immigrants that they've been distributing all throughout the country. And now there's no money left to address hurricane relief for Florida. And they're right in the middle right now of a category 4 or 5 hurricane that's following 2 weeks after a really bad one. So I know that it is such a bad issue that, there was a press conference today where the president and Vice President Harris were there to try to make sure that the public did not blame them for what the failures of the federal government that's going on.
Right.
So I just think that, this is probably the time. I mean, and there will be a huge backlash at some point about this rising crime and what to do about it. And it's going to be worse than the one we had with Reagan, because the pendulum to the left has swung really hard and gone longer than I would have expected. So the swing to the right will be just as hard and just as bad.
Yeah. And, I'm conservative, and it sounds like you are too. I know a lot of Texas is. And, I've been paying attention to what's been going on. There's so much hypocrisy that many politicians, they want to be the social justice warriors, and all the ideals, all the radical ideals, is like they want to represent them and please them and please those people. And one thing that you said, also heard Colin Kaepernick say that he wanted to close all the prisons, or he would like to see it happen. And it wasn't a racial thing. He just said, no, close all prisons, let everybody out, because prisons are oppressive. And when I hear him saying this, about him saying it, I'm imagining that he's doing it while he's setting the alarm on his mansion and looking over his 12-foot wall, because he is not going to let criminals being turned loose in the street come and affect him and his family. And there's just hypocrisy.
Sense. Why? Yeah, there's a hypocrisy about it. But when we're saying, I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court addressed this issue, and in a dissent, one of the justices was saying, can you imagine releasing the equivalent of a division, a military group of a division, into the public that is full of criminals? That's all they are, criminals. I mean, and the Supreme Court had data. They're saying, when we've done this in the past, it has always had the same result. Crime will increase. And what would happen if we closed the doors on all of our prisons? Crime would increase. We couldn't do anything to these people. We couldn't send them to prison because we closed the prison. They would see that as a green light. You can't do anything to them if they commit crime. And so we would have chaos. and we would have crime go up like you would never believe. I mean, our system is not perfect, but we have to be able to provide public safety. If we don't,
Yes.
we don't have a society. And the men and women of the United States demand public safety, and if the government's not going to give it to them, they're going to give it to themselves, and we call that vigilante justice.
Right.
And in the Old West, when we enacted laws, criminal laws, it was to protect the criminals, not the public. Now we're at the point where if the public cannot get public safety, they will provide it for themselves. And again, no one will be, they'll just go out, and if they think somebody's committed a crime and they need to be punished for it, they'll punish them right then and there.
Yeah.
That's what we don't want as a society, but we have to have public safety.
Right. Safety is number one by any means necessary. People are going to play defense, and they have to, as a bare minimum, defend themselves and their families. And I've been thinking about different ideas, and all over the country you hear different politicians. I still remember I believe it was 2020, this woman on a city council in Minneapolis that was one of these advocates for defunding the police, and said she didn't want the police to go out, no police that have guns, no cops that are armed to go out at all. We're looking for a more holistic approach to law enforcement. And so I'm like this. Let's have sandboxes where if somebody thinks that something is going to work, let's let individual cities vote. Let them vote if they want that thing to be implemented.
Well, just imagine what that city council person was saying. We're only going to send social workers out for certain crimes. Well, who's doing the triage? I mean, who's making the decision? On this call, we're going to send a police officer. On this call, we're going to send a social worker. And what's going to happen when they make the wrong decision and they send a social worker to a situation where they should have sent a police officer and they end up getting killed? Well, the county's going to get sued. I mean, there's very little, because they made a mistake. So they end up sending a social worker and a police officer pretty much in those situations to every crime. And it increases the cost even more for the county. And the problem I have with all this defund the police movement, it really was about, like you mentioned, social programs. The biggest budget for any county is public safety. It's the police. So when they say we're going to defund the police, that means we're going to decrease their budget, but we're not going to save that money. We're going to put it into social programs. So it was really a way to just increase social program budgets with a lot of political rhetoric. Now, here we are years later, we're increasing the budgets of the police again, but they're keeping those increases in their social programs up. And so it's just ended up in taxes being increased across the board. I'm at the point where I'm cynical enough where I think that was really the motivation in the beginning, was just they wanted to move some of that money to social programs, which is what they were pushing to begin with.
It makes sense. It is. There are just different mindsets of people. There are some folks in government who are naive. The people that think that you can have a gun ban and that will somehow make crime go down, and that criminals are going to stop buying guns, when they're just I guess that's ignorance, thinking that criminals go to a gun store and do a background check when they don't. They buy hot guns with the serial number scraped off with a metal file, and they're going to get guns on the street. And
I live in Texas. I live in Texas, and I'm not really a gun person. I mean, I haven't really gone hunting since I was in high school, and I'm 63 years old now. But I would hate to tell you how many guns I have in my house. I mean, I probably have a couple of guns in my safe in my bedroom.
Sure.
I probably have some guns that are all covered up and wrapped from old hunting days, but I probably have, almost a dozen guns in my house.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, a lot of people don't break into houses in Texas because they know Texas is a big gun rights state. And, that's one of the arguments they make during World War II, that, Japan never tried to invade the United States because they thought everybody had guns.
Yeah, right. It's true. It works. And then in north of Atlanta, there's a suburb. I think it's Kennesaw or Marietta. I'm not sure, but I know it's a northern suburb where the city made it the law that everyone has to own a gun in their home. And when they
Wow.
made that law enacted, the number of break-ins, just the attempt
Hmm.
of break-ins, just dropped down to almost zero.
Wow.
Because the criminals, they're expecting you. The criminals are not breaking into homes where they think somebody's home. If they do think somebody's home, they're betting on them being asleep. But
Hmm.
they're not wanting to go places where where the other guy's going to have a gun too.
I
That's
like
not
that. I
their
mean,
goal.
look, I'm not a big advocate for mandating anybody own a gun, but I do like the thought behind that because I've always said, look, I have a problem with you, the government, wanting to take away my gun rights, but at the same time, you don't want to provide me with public safety. And so, if you're not going to provide me with public safety, at the very least, give me the right to own a gun to provide it for myself. That one actually goes to the next level. It really kind of puts the ownership onus on public safety on the public.
Yeah,
You could argue that that's where we're going if the government doesn't change its course. You can already see. I mean, there's been reports in this election cycle where people who identify as liberal are going out and buying guns, and
yeah,
if they're buying guns, it's because they don't feel safe and they don't
right.
feel like the government is providing them with public safety, and so they feel like they have to do it themselves. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. We have to have that, and then many of these politicians who are saying it, they say that they own guns, or like Cori Bush saying that she needs to have security. She needs to have armed security around her because she's so important and a public figure. Well, she knows how bad it is. And a lot of people don't even know who she is. And she
mhm.
she doesn't feel safe going about.
Yeah.
And people try to take out Trump, with him not even being in office. So, all bets are off. Someone who's been president of the United States and is a billionaire, they're not safe. Obviously, I mean, pierced with a bullet. So
Yeah.
it's it's okay. I'm a fan of westerns and classic movies too, and I remember a great line from Shane where he told the woman, a gun is only as good or as bad as the man who's using it. And that could be a good cop, a bad cop, could be a citizen. So it's not the gun, it's the man or the woman behind it. When
You know,
people
one of
play
the
defense, there's less crime.
well, one of the things that I see is, we're kind of giving up on misdemeanor crime across the United States, in the name of, well, it's a minor thing. And so when we do that, I don't think we realize that today's misdemeanors become tomorrow's felonies. Because if they see that nothing's going to happen to them, they get more brazen. And so
Yes.
we're actually creating situations where the criminals are actually going to be in a worse situation in 5 years because we refuse to do anything to them for the misdemeanor crimes they commit. And if we would just take into consider, hey, this is your situation, this is your criminal history, we're going to hold you accountable for what you did, then we would never see them back into the system for their felony, and they would have become productive citizens. I mean, there's a really good case called Sanchez versus Alabama that went through the system where they had to live under one of these really bad TROs and they or preliminary injunction. They had to release everybody. They couldn't hold anyone. They couldn't hold anybody accountable, and live that
Hmm.
way for 4 years. And then they won. It got reversed, and they got to go back and take take control of crime and do it kind of like what I call the old fashioned way. And
Hmm.
I had an interview with the sheriff on our podcast, and he said, look, it took us about 6 months to change the mentality. But then
Hmm.
once we started holding people accountable and we said, if you don't go to court, there's consequences, crime started going down after about 6 months. So we know what the recipe is. We know what we need to do. We just have to take the shackles off of the criminal justice system
Right.
and tell them to hold people accountable. Do your job.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And movies like The Purge used to be like a science fiction fantasy horror. And so when you watch that now, with the exception of the masks or the costumes, none of that seems far fetched now. It all looks as something possible, something that could happen. Or
I would
movies like
argue that I would argue the purge is kind of any given weekend right now in Chicago
oh yeah,
because they have so much crime,
yeah,
and then they've gotten rid of they got rid of the private industry years ago, but they recently in the last year got rid of cash bail, and that's just made their situation so much worse. And everybody's making it out like, oh, we just got rid of the private industry bail system. No, you got rid of the ability of a defendant to post cash with the court, and that's made the system that was already really bad worse. And they're now coming out, oh, well, it hasn't made crime worse. Your crime is so bad in Chicago, you should be shooting for improving it, not for
yeah.
not making it worse.
Well, Lori Lightfoot, when she was a mayor, she was so inept that she told the citizens of Chicago, don't call the police if you see somebody shooting and firing a gun. If it's two people shooting at each other, that's mutual combat. So leave them alone. If only one person has a gun and they're shooting up something or they're menacing people, then you can call us. And that's because she, as the boss of the chief of police, and the police department, they didn't know what to do, or she didn't want to give them a free reign, to give them what they needed to really grab control of the
Well,
situation.
look, there's so many things going on in Chicago, but I would argue we've turned Chicago over to the gangs. And
Oh
so
yeah,
that mentality is if you see two people shooting each other, we'll just assume they're gangs and we don't care. We just hope they kill each other. Well, I mean, we've had that mentality for many years in our past where,
hmm,
okay, minority on minority crime, we discount that. We really don't care. We hope they kill each other. No, we don't do that. We value all life. And
yes,
so we're going to treat all crime as equals and we want to treat everybody the same. And so, I mean, we want crimes to be prosecuted no matter what the color of their skin. And so we have this problem right now where we have allegations of systemic racism, but really what it is we have more crime being committed in our minority groups because of this past mentality. As long as it's on minority crime, we don't care. No, we care now, and and as a result of our history, we have too much minority on minority crime, and we need to get a hold of it. It's not okay. Lightfoot was wrong, and we have to address that.
yes. I agree with that, and also a huge cause of it is the lack of fathers in the home.
Mm-hmm.
That's a young man, that's a boy's first police officer, teaching him that there's punishment.
Well, but that's an example of so many other things. The inner cities, they're saying, we're going to fix this now. We're going to fix it by not prosecuting them and giving them social support. But I'm like, you've already screwed up on families. You already
Yeah,
screwed up on schools. We have a terrible dropout rate on our minority communities. We have a terrible situation in our inner cities on drugs. And with the protests, whatever you want to call riots from several years ago, we have
mm,
businesses that were destroyed. They did not come back. So we have no economic opportunity in our urban cities, or less than we had. And
right.
so we have terrible situations that they say, I mean, they failed at every turn. And now they're saying, oh, we'll fix it. Don't worry. We'll fix it on criminal justice reform. Everything they've done has made it worse. And the data is showing that their criminal justice reform in our inner cities is making it worse and is causing crime to increase, which they deny because they can't admit it because there would be
Right.
such a backlash among the public.
Yes, I totally agree. And then, Ken, if you can talk about with bail reform, as specifically with it being something that needs a change, just talk about that. Like, and what is the main thing that you would like to see reformed in that system?
Well, I classify bail reform into bad bail reform and good bail reform. Anything that weakens the system, ties the hands of judges, takes away their discretion. I call that bad bail reform. We've seen that in New York. We've seen it attempted in L.A. or California. We've seen it in other states. And, anything that says, okay, judges, we're going to have charge-based release and we're just going to rely on somebody's promise that they're going to come back to court, that's bad bail reform, because you can't hold them accountable. It creates huge backlogs. It creates chaos. Chaos is de facto decriminalization. And then you've got good bail reform like Texas did, where they have limited the use of simple release for violent offenses. They have required judges to review criminal histories before setting bail, and holding people accountable. So we have to go back to what we know works. What we teach in colleges on how to lower crime. This little Sally Sunshine things where we're going to try things that have never been researched, have never been done before, but we promise it's going to work this time. Everybody wants to go to court and resolve their case. I think we now know that that's absolutely not true, and we need to get rid of those policies. And it shouldn't be a blue state or red state issue. It should be. It should not be a public safety, whether you're Democrat or Republican. It should all just be, are we going to have crime, or are we not? Are we going to fight crime? And I think everybody by and large would agree with that. The reason why we're having the issues that we're having is we've got activist groups that are focusing on inner city elections where only one party rules, and they're funding candidates that they can control. And so our inner cities are seeing the brunt of these policies because they're being targeted by these groups.
Yes, I agree. We all have the same basic needs, and I think that however someone votes, or their affiliation, or whether they're far to the left or the right, they need to be safe. It's criminals and it's law-abiding citizens. That's a bigger divide in groups than people that are trying to live their lives every day and go to work and take care of themselves and their families. So that's how people need to think and how they need to vote. So everyone, it's undeniable, regardless of how high they are and what level they're on in the ivory tower as a politician or public official, or someone that's in a lower class, has the same needs. And that's how we need to vote. People need to really pay attention to what people are saying, and if they've had any length of time in public office, look at their record, look at what they have done. As someone that's been in the White House already 4 years, or been in Congress over 40 years, I want to know what you have already done, because people in the second stage, or the second half of life, they really don't change their philosophy or their ideals, how they feel about things. So we need to watch people's record and hold them accountable. So,
well, if I lived in New York or California right now, I would be looking for candidates that say we need more capacity on our jail space. New York is looking at closing Rikers Island without any good plan for replacement. And so suddenly their ability to put people in jail is going to be reduced by thousands and thousands of beds. And so you would have no choice but to decriminalize stuff, because you wouldn't have the ability. A lot of what California is going through is because a federal court put a cap on how many people they could hold in their prison system, and they did not build additional beds. So all the things they're doing in California, you can see exactly they're wanting to reduce the number of people in their prison system. It doesn't have anything to do about public safety. It doesn't have they can say it is, but the reality is no, they're trying to reduce the prison the number of people in prison, and they're not willing to build additional beds. We could address the problems in California by building additional prison capacity. They're not willing to do that. That's the politicians are using that to force these types of issues. And that's the reason why I think in New York City, they're pushing to close Rikers Island. It's for the same reason. It will force them to do things that the public would never, ever agree with otherwise.
Yes. Thank you for that, Ken. Thank you for this interview. You've shared some helpful insight and information to people about what's going on in society. you live in Texas, I'm in Georgia, and we're speaking about Chicago, California, and this is a nationwide issue, and people need to be aware. And we all have, thank God, the power to vote. So we just need to pay attention to what's going on. Look at policy, and how what people are going to do affects us, rather than their race or their party, or thinking that they're going to represent us because of a title or a label.
Well, and I would just ask for people listening to this. I said, historically in our country, both parties have been law and order parties. They've both stressed public safety. But right now, politics has bled into this so much that one party is taking the opposite approach on public safety and doesn't even want to admit there's an issue. So if the voters for one election said, I'm going to be a single issue voter, I'm going to vote on crime, I'm going to vote for this one party, and I promise you, if you did it one election, the other party would wake up and suddenly
Yeah.
become law and order. And then you can go back to all the identity politics issues that we are always bombarded with. But it would only take one election to do that. And we are weeks away from that opportunity. So I
Yeah.
would ask people to vote this election on public safety. And you would be shocked. Suddenly, 6 weeks from now, both parties will be public safety minded, and we don't have to worry about it. Then we can go back and worry about all the other identity politics issues.
It's really the number one thing, even more than the economy. Because if public safety goes away, if my safety goes away, the rest of the stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. And if you can't have public safety, then the safety that you do prosecute becomes political. And so you end up just prosecuting your political enemies.
Yeah, we've seen that. All right, Ken. Thank you very much. And is there any information you wanna put out where people can follow you, or hear more from you on internet?
Sure. If people want more information about our group, you can go to pbtx.com, which is the Professional Bondsmen of Texas.com. We have a blog, which is on our menu, but we also have our own podcast, which is called The Bell Post. There's a link on the website, but you can also go to thebellpost.com. All we cover there is criminal justice issues, and we highlight how different states work and what different systems look like. Our goal is to educate legislators and the public on what is bad bail reform and what is good bail reform. And thank you so much for having me today. And I hope that people that would like more information will go to our site and our podcast.
You're welcome, and you've been great. Thank you for being a guest on this show. And everybody, take care of yourself, and we will catch you on the next episode.